Hello and welcome back to Tangents and Gameplay, or Gameplay and Tangents. I haven't really sorted out a name yet. I'm not sure. Can't remember what I have in the thumbnail right now. This is a very sloppy operation. I did a video called DKC, or Donkey Kong Country Therapy, and I gotta admit, that's kind of what Mario RPG is right now, or what this particular session is. I'm not entirely sure, proof of concept, how well I like this. I am thinking about starting Chrono Trigger, another RPG. I've just heard a ton of good stuff about it. I've had it for a while, and I just hadn't messed with it. And I think when I'm doing like a playthrough of a game that I've never played before, I think it's going to actually be better to have live commentary, because I'll be doing a lot of thinking out loud. It won't just be reacting, especially in RPG where you have time to process things. You know, it's one thing if you're trying to do a commentary on like F-Zero or even a side scroller, depending on how fast you're moving through it. It can be really hard to, you know, you're mostly going to be just saying whatever's happening on screen, but it's going to be going by so quickly that you can't really form complete sentences. I've noticed that looking back at some of the stuff. I hate watching my own stuff. I don't watch it for long periods of time, but sometimes I will look at it to try to get an idea, like an honest appraisal of what's going on, of what I'm seeing. And I do notice I cut myself off a lot of incomplete sentences, a lot of incomplete thoughts. I even do that on this type of video, which sucks, but it's not as often, it's not as prevalent. But I think for something like Chrono Trigger, where, like I said, the pacing is slow enough that I can actually make comments, I can actually express thoughts, and thoughts about the game, too. I mean, this is a game that's, I don't know how old, 30 years old, and it's considered one of the best by many people, many outlets. I mean, anytime you hear about it, nobody ever says, Chrono Trigger, it was alright. It's usually unequivocal praise. And so for something like that, obviously I'm intrigued, but, you know, and just to see, okay, for somebody who didn't play it back then, so I don't have nostalgia, well, I don't have nostalgia, I don't have the glasses I referred to, I think, in the last episode, where it's not even nostalgia, it's the lens by which you view it, because it's like you're able to view it from a different age. It's almost like going back in time. So while you're watching it, it's almost like you're watching it as that age. Now, I'm not saying we should try to do that, or that's... Well, I think some version of that is healthy, and then there's a very unhealthy version, which is where you actually have disparate or split personalities, and so you actually genuinely have somebody who's a 5 or 6 year old, like, regressing into that age. But usually that's attached to some kind of trauma, not just a video game. So we see Mallow is passed out, and Mario is sleeping. I can relate to that. That's the thing. Right now, I'm kind of back in the same spot that I was before I started doing the trucking job. For those who don't know, I just finished. I was doing an overnight driving job, where usually I'd get there between 11 o'clock at night and 1:30 in the morning, and run a preset route with, you know, preset stops, delivering car engines, transmissions, bumpers, cages with a bunch of stuff in them, John Deere type materials, type things, you know, truck supplies, just, yeah, all that kind of stuff. So nothing really exciting, but it wasn't, you know, well, usually was a bunch of boxes and then some pretty decent sized freight. So it wasn't, you had a few routes where you could just pallet jack them off into like a loading dock, but most of the stops you had to use a lift gate, and it wasn't as clean cut as that. But anyway, that's what I wanted. I wanted something that was going to get the blood flowing, get me out of a chair, get me out of a sedentary lifestyle, kind of challenge me a little bit physically. I was going to learn the route and memorize it and just keep my head down and just make deliveries every night. And that was the other thing too. It's kind of like when I had a paper route. You have your weekends, and that's it. You know, there is, I mean, you had occasional holidays, but that's the thing with freight. And I think I've mentioned this before, but when it comes to shipping, you don't, any day you get off, you're going to pay for it later on. If you get a holiday off, the only thing that doesn't qualify is if you take a day, if you get vacation, which if you're a contractor like I was, means you don't get paid for that day. So that's a big hit, but somebody else is typically running your route. So you're not going to have to make up for that later on. But anytime we had a holiday or something, it usually took a week or two, but one day you just had 2 to 3 times the amount of freight to move as you normally did. And it was all those days off, getting Christmas and New Year's off, it was catching up to you, so that you never really get a true day off. And it's kind of a bummer. And, you know, if you're sick, I mean, I probably had 3 weeks out of the 5 months I think that I worked there 3 to 4 weeks, almost a full month worth, where I was sick. It was some form or another. And a lot of it was I'd end up riding with, when I was riding solo, it was fine. But when I started training people, and most of the time it was people with kids. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but you just know that kids are picking up a lot more gunk and crazy crap than adults are, because of, they're in school, they're mixing it up with other kids. And anyway, it never failed. Anytime I'd ride with somebody who, had kids, went home or came from a house that had a bunch of kids or people in it, that sure enough, within a day or two, I had some kind of some nonsense. So so obviously not ideal. But my point in all that is, I got that job to get out of my sedentary lifestyle. I was before that I was a video editor. And we started doing more and more location visits where we'd go out and I'd be responsible for helping to shoot a lot of the stuff as well. Never had to do the interviews, but I was, recording the audio, setting up the camera, setting up the lighting. It was kind of a full deal, which, in general is good. I can't say that I was, by that point I was already kind of starting to sour a little bit on, for lack of a term, like company mission. And some of the people, they were getting excited, hey, we're going to go see Disney. We talk to people at Disney. I'm like, that's not a company that I really have an interest in visiting. And, really, Hollywood in general. Hollywood has become abysmal. And when I was younger, that was the dream. Become a part of Hollywood, get in the system, and be a part of the movie making and the magic making. But I think it's been a long time since that delusion has left me, since that illusion has left, and realized just how much corruption and wickedness and just horrible things dwell in Hollywood and circulate, are part of the business of how the business is done. And now now they can't even put out a good product. It used to be, okay, you kind of had a sense, or you heard that some stuff was going on, but it seemed like they were still making wholesome products, or products at least, or movies and TV shows that you could enjoy. And while there some get through the cracks, I would say on the whole, I just write off the entertainment industry in general. That includes video games. That's why I do a lot of retro gaming. I do have a couple games that are coming that I think came out last year. They're side scrollers. One of them is Moonrider, which really is crazy because some of the premise from that actually matches a premise in the book that I'm writing. And even one of the terms, Guardians, was one of the terms that I was using for ostensible Guardians, ostensible people who are fighting for protection and everything, and comes out they're not. So I have to come up with a new name for that. I don't want to have any parallels there. But anyway, looks like a fun, cool side-scrolling game a la Ninja Gaiden? Ninja Gaiden? Yeah, right? Yeah, because I thought it was Gaiden. And honestly, I personally think Gaiden sounds cool. I don't know why, but Ninja Gaiden sounds awesome. Then I heard it's Ninja Gaiden, and I'm like, I don't know, it just doesn't have the same panache. But I'm a stickler for pronouncing things the way it's supposed to be, like Jaguar. Jaguar, I think, sounds really freaking cool, but I'm pretty sure the car company is a UK-based car company, and they pronounce it Jaguar. So, especially when I'm talking about the car, I'll call it a Jaguar, because that's how the people who make the car pronounce it. And I'll do that for anything. So Ninja Gaiden, if that's what it's. Same thing with, I remember we used to think as kids that it was Ryu. Yeah, Ryu. We thought it was Ryu, R-Y-U. The guy from Street Fighter. Hadouken! Thought it was Ryu, but it's apparently Ryu, which doesn't look or sound right to me, but I've heard enough, like the people that, at Capcom or whatever that worked on the game pronounce it Ryu, and it's like, okay, that's how it's supposed to be pronounced. I'll pronounce it that way. But yeah, Ninja Gaiden. Ninja Gaiden, I almost want to just, create something else, but create a word that, because the way it's spelled, it looks like it'd be pronounced Gaiden. G-A-I? Well, I guess, maybe guy, but G-U-Y would be guy, but then G-A-Y would be gay, so I don't know. We got gay guy, Ninja Gaiden. Anyway, I want to figure out a way to spell it in a way that I can pronounce it Gaiden and have it mean something cool, but I'm not going to waste my time with that right now. Ooh, instead of Guardians, maybe Guidance. Well, that just sounds like guidance counselor, which is a nice profession, but not cool. Anyway. Why did I get off on that? Oh, because it's Moonrider is in the style of like Ninja Gaiden. And then there's one, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's kind of like a I guess a modern iteration, still side-scrolling, of like a Mega Man game, which I've always been a fan of, so that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll probably be playing those as well. Well, I'd like to. Who knows? Right now, I'm able to do this because I'm kind of in the middle of the process. I don't really have a to-do list. I mean, I do have a to-do list, but not an official one from like my realtor. Like, hey, these are the things that need to be done before we can put your house on the market. Like, you need to move this stuff into storage, or get it out of the house, or take this off the wall. Like, when she tells me what I need to do in order to have the best opportunity to sell, then I'll have to start executing on that end of things. But in the meantime, I've got a few days where I'm just kind of putting things where they need to go and trying to clean up and make it look as open and normal as possible. I did put some of the action figures away. I love, like, I grew up with the Superpowers line of action figures. I was able to find some, used, of course. You're trying to find brand new it's hard, and it's really expensive. So I didn't go that route. But just some nice nostalgia stuff to be on the desk when I'm working. So I put a lot of those away. Some Star Wars figures, stuff like that, just to kind of elevate the place, make it seem a little more like it belonged to an adult versus a man-child, which I don't think I'm a man-child. I mean, everything I think looks pretty classy. I don't just have it sitting around. I'm not trying to play with them or anything. I have them posed in certain ways. They're decor. It really is what they are. Same with like Lord of the Rings swords and all that good stuff. Anyway, enough talk about that. So I'm getting stuff, preliminary things done. But once I have those marching orders, once the house is on the market, I'm got to, every time somebody wants to come look at it, I'm gonna have to step out. I mean, that's one of the main reasons. I haven't had to worry about that too much, because the last time I sold that place, it sold the first day. Like, the first people who looked at it put an offer on it, and it was an offer I couldn't refuse. And that was it. So it'll be interesting to see. Hopefully it'll be the same thing here. Within a couple days, the first few people who look at it will be interested. Because otherwise, I mean, we had to do that when we sold the house in Fredericksburg, Virginia. It was a much longer process, and I just remember we'd be hanging out, doing whatever. It was like, hey, somebody's coming by to look at the house. Stop what you're doing. Got to go leave the house for however long and walk around the block or something and wait for the people to leave. And at first you don't mind, because you're like, hey, they're here to, hopefully here to put an offer on the house. But after the first 10, then you start getting a little jaded, and you're like, oh, they're not going to buy it anyway. Why do I care? Like, can't we just hang out anyway? But I mean, you don't want to be there when they're there. But so we'll see. It's a big mess, lots of stuff going on. But when that stuff starts happening, when I enter into that phase, like, things like this are going to become rare. So I'm trying to do as much as I can now, because I don't know when I'm going to get to do it again. And if it sells, I'm going to have to pack all this stuff up, and I'm not going to be able to do anything with it for probably a month or so. And even then, it's going to be finding a job. If I make the move before June, I'm going to have to, well, I don't need to bother you with all that, but I'm going to have to procure employment of some kind, because that's when, in theory, my new job will start. But even that's not definite at this point. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And the part of this, kind of going back to what I was saying initially with the Donkey Kong Country therapy, it's not therapy like, oh, I need to work through some stuff. It's just being in the nostalgia nook, as I've come to call it, and just having some good old-fashioned retro gaming going on is kind of, it's a nice place to be. It's a happy place, a happy time, and I earned it today. Doggone it! I did a lot of packaging, a lot of boxing, a lot of organizing. But yeah, that's it. But there are sometimes in life where you're in a transitional period, but there's really no physical evidence of it. Like, you're not really moving, maybe aren't even changing your job. You just get a feeling that there's something changing in your life, whether it's a relationship, a beginning or ending, whether it's a way you see the world, something big that happens, but it's not outward, and you just feel like you feel restless, or you feel like you're waiting for something to happen. It's a transitional period, a transitional season, but you just can't put your finger on it. You can't really tell anybody. I mean, you can tell people there's nothing wrong with it, but you can't point them to something specific and say, see, this is a transition. Whereas right now I am in a transitional season, and there's a lot of transitioning, changing jobs, changing states, changing a lot of things. And what I guess really my concern is I've noticed that after working my last day at my last job, I've gone back to that sedentary lifestyle where now to be fair, it had been 7 or 8 months, because I started having sleeping issues before I even left my last job. And then they carried over. They got worse when I was working overnight, because then my body's trying to adjust, and it never really did. But I couldn't sleep for more than, I've said this before, 2 or 3 hours at a time, and it was miserable. And that was even happening when I was at like I said, at the last job before this one. So I'm just enjoying this past week. I've been able to sleep for about 7 to 8 hours in a sitting, at a time. And then, I'm just kind of leisurely getting out of bed and just kind of trying to enjoy that. Because, that's the thing too. Like, in the back of your head, you're like, I got all this stuff I got to do. I really need to be getting things done. But I also got to remember, hey, when I'm back in the saddle, when things are going again, I'm not going to have time to sleep in. I'm not going to be able to just kind of slide out of bed when I want to. There's going to be more demands put on what I do. That's just how everything is. So part of the challenge in transitional periods like this is to enjoy the transition itself and not try to be anxious about it, not try to think about what you have to do, what's going to happen, and just try to be people say, as in the moment. Try to be in the moment of the transition. It's really a big challenge, because in the back of my mind, I got all these concerns, I got all these questions. It's like, if I could just quiet those and I can enjoy the transition time for what it is, and as much as there is uncertainty, and as much as I need to kind of force myself to do things because there's nothing telling me I have to do them other than me wanting to get them done. It's like, okay, if I want to put this place on the market as soon as possible, I need to prepare it for that, and it needs to be ready. And when the realtor tells me, hey, this is what you need to do, I need to do that. And if I don't, it's on me, and who knows when, it's like, okay, well then your house isn't going to get on the market for a month instead of a couple weeks. So it's intrinsic motivation, which I've got that covered. Like, when it comes to distinct goals like selling house, getting new job, okay, that's a little bit easier. At the same time, you start to kind of enjoy not working at the moment, even though you're going, okay, my finances are crumbling around me. Like, every day that I'm not working, it's, I'm digging into savings that I don't want to be touching. But so I don't know, but I feel myself kind of lapsing back into that more sedentary. Wait, how's Mario passing it? Oh, I missed it. I forgot. He didn't lose a fight though. He just something. Oh, this is introducing Gino, not to be confused with Genos from One Punch Man. Genos is interesting too, just because it's so. I mean, as far as I know, there was no precedent for him. I mean, like the Tsar could have manifested in any way. Like, just the idea that it became a character, that they made this new character. I mean, they had a full roster with Peach, Bowser, Mario, and Mallow. So just interesting. Like, did they choose it because they wanted this cool character that could his hands could turn up and he could shoot, bullets out of them, or, just what was the motivation for creating this character? Because you didn't need it to flesh out the roster necessarily, or you could have added Toad. Now, granted, I think Genos is much better than Toad. I prefer him to Toad. Did Miyamoto or somebody be like, did they watch Pinocchio and were like, hey, I just want to have a cool little puppet? Get it together, Gino. Come on, man. There you go. Now you got it. I mean, he is kind of cool. He's it's funny. He got the little. He reminds me very much of claymation Rankin Bass. And maybe that was kind of the point. It even had a little bit of a Christmassy music sound when he was going through everything. When he was awakening and realizing. Anyway, it's a curious thing. And obviously, hey, I'm all about, if you want to make new characters, that's we have a dearth of that right now. Everything's getting rehashed and remade and transformed. You can't have a character be what a character was before. They have to do something to it, which I'm a big fan of original stuff, even if I'm not a big fan of an original character's backstory, name, whatever it is. If you're going to do a remake, I want all that stuff to be the same. I want the original intent to be there. And that's just the way I am. I prefer originals to copies, if I can help it. And that's everything from characters to collectible stuff, everything. I think they came out with like a line of like super power figures that were like updated and, you know, brand new. Obviously they were cheaper, easier to get, but I was like, the appeal isn't a cooler figure. I want the original. I want what was made back in the 80s. And ideally, something from the 80s, something that actually was manufactured in the 80s. There's just something about it that I can't really put words to, or I choose not to. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I don't want to think about that too much right now. It's just not something that interests me as a thought exercise. But cool, we're doing stuff. I made pretty good progress through this game. But then I went and watched some other people's playthrough, or started watching pieces of it, and I realized there were a lot of places that I missed. Like there's a Yoshi race, you know, and I remember, okay, yeah, you feed him cookies and it helps you speed up. I vaguely remember it from when I played it on the Super Nintendo, but it's not in this playthrough. And I don't know how I missed it, where it was supposed to be, but somehow I completely missed that, and it made me wonder how much other stuff I ended up missing. But aside from that, it's a pretty straightforward game. Like every time you get to a new village, you've got a thick shirt, then you've got electric shirt. Like every village has upgrades for all the armor. Really, there's not any, you don't really have to debate, well, you know, what do I want to wear? It's like, I should upgrade everything. It's always going to be a better stat. The only thing that was really in question was your pins. And I'm pretty sure I didn't have, you know, the coolest ones, but, you know, got through the game. And I think it would have been, obviously it was a lot harder before they had like the team ups that you can do. And I think they made some other changes that actually made the gameplay easier. But overall, it's not, I don't think it's the most intricate or deep RPG that's out there, and I haven't played a ton of them, so I'm not saying that authoritatively, but it just seemed that you didn't have to do a lot of figuring out. You could kind of piece together what you needed to do pretty quick. And you didn't really, the good thing was you didn't have to farm. Like I didn't have to farm or what do you call that? I think it's just farming, where you didn't have to go through and try to farm for XP or items. There were more than enough of everything really to get through the game. But anyway, it was fun, and I mean the music is great. And I love the fact that they did a reorchestra. I don't even know if that's a word. Where it's the exact same melodies and overall sound. Again, I don't have a great music vocabulary, but it's not. Oh, it has that, but it's you know, a more orchestral sound, less video game sounding and more actual music sounding. And I like that. That's, again, like I said, holding true to the original, and they give you the option to listen to the actual original if you want to listen to that. But to me, it's just an improvement on what was there. I know that kind of flies in the face of what I just said about original. But I mean, if it was a different sound, if they were using different tracks, then I would revert back to the original. But it's like, this is the original, just not a bunch of boop, 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 boop. It's actual music. I love when they did that with like Zelda. And they've done it with like Street Fighter and pretty much, I think, any game at this point. Obviously, on YouTube, you can find a ton of great musicians who've done covers of pretty much any video game song that's out there. But, you know, especially when you have orchestral presentation. I remember hearing, I think it was the London Symphony Orchestra. I'd have to look at it again. But there's some orchestra that did, like Mario Brothers. Went from, you know, like the grass, they did that, and then they went into the lower level, like 1, 2, the underground, the underground levels, the cave levels, I guess. And they just ended with a nice so it was the game over music, but the way they played it, the instruments that they chose and the way they played it didn't sound sad. It was just kind of like, and this is the end of our presentation. But it just sounded amazing. You just realize just how good some of the music is in terms of just how it was written, because when you can hear it with normal instruments in a accurate presentation, it just sounds beautiful. Same thing, like I said, with Zelda. Although I will say, Zelda, the main theme always gets me. I love it. But a lot of the other music, to me, is, I wouldn't say forgettable, but it doesn't have... The same thing with Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic the Hedgehog, Grasslands or Green Hill Zone, love that love that I could listen to it, well, I wouldn't say all day, but, you know, I could listen to it quite often, and it has that strong nostalgia vibe to it. But I probably, I could probably identify other tracks if you were to, you know, if somebody played like 10 tracks and 2 of them were Sonic. I'd like to think I could figure out what those were. If nothing else, because Sega had its own general sound. So I probably wouldn't be able to distinguish a Sonic level from another Sega game, but just the composers at Sega, and I think the way that they put their music together was different, significantly different from how Nintendo did it. Especially the Super Nintendo, that definitely had a sound. You had your like Contra 3 and Mario Kart. They had this, I don't know how to describe it, but it's a digital instrument, for lack of a better word, that is featured heavily in both of them. It's like a womp womp. My mouth can't do it justice. But is like, you could tell, I guess, either the same composer or at least the same digital music library was being used, or digital instrument was being used to create those soundtracks. And I think just Sega, in a lot of ways, just sounds very, very different for its exclusives, obviously. So I think that by virtue of that alone, if you were to put that against any other Nintendo game, I would probably be able to identify it as a Sonic game. But anyway, it's just the way it is with some stuff. But like with Mario, I mean, yeah, I mean the main theme is obviously the most memorable, but the Star Power song, they're all memorable to me. But again, it's because I played them a lot as a kid. But you know, Mario RPG has a ton of great tracks. But, you know, Donkey Kong Country, I just did like I said, the therapeutic playthrough of that. And you just realize, man, there's probably like 5 or 6 really, really good tracks in that one as well. Anyway, I don't know why I'm getting off on music tracks. Bottom line is, this is a happy place for me right now. And I don't know when I'll be able to revisit it again. Obviously, we have, I think, there's a total of 14 episodes. This is the 4th one, so we've got 10 more after this. It's a little more streamlined. Well, it's a lot more streamlined than my Tears of the Kingdom playthrough, which can be found on Rumble and on the Roll to One channel. I believe has all of the uploads there as well on YouTube. But that was 33 episodes, I think, of 4 hours apiece. So, like over 100 hours to beat Tears of the Kingdom, where this one was about 14 hours, 13 hours, something like that. Yeah, I'm thinking about Chrono Trigger. But then there's other games like Ninja Gaiden. I've wanted to play that one as well, just because I know it gets a lot of hype as, you know, being a very difficult game, at least back in the day. And I kind of want to give it a shot. That True Form pin, Mario. I hate people saying Mario. Mario's True Form pin really is probably the MVP of this game. Because you get to a point where it's like almost every bad guy or every battle you got into, there was at least somebody there trying to turn you into a mushroom or a scarecrow. And that True Form pin keeps you in the fight. I remember part of my difficulty back in the day was having all my characters turn into mushrooms and not being able to do anything. And really, you could get stuck in a loop where it just continues to spore you and you can never fight back. So yeah, definitely one of the smartest decisions I made, holding on to that True Form pin. Anywho. But I'm also getting the idea that, you know, I can do this for me, because and it really does. Like, editing these, even though it's not complicated, it kind of keeps the juices flowing. Like when I was out of this, when I was just doing the driving work, I'd forgotten like basic keyboard shortcuts for saving, for going to the rendering screen and all that kind of stuff. So it's good for keeping my editing sharp, or keeps the editing techniques in mind, because you really can. You don't use them for a while, you got to shake the dust off next time you have a project. And unfortunately, I've got some freelance coming in, and just editing these kind of helps keep me in that loop. I'm not like, oh crap, what am I doing on this timeline again? But yeah, it's, you know, that helps keep me in it. And it helps justify, I think it would be very hard for me to play video games just to play video games. It's if I can create something out of it is what makes it worthwhile to me personally at this point in my life. But I don't think it's my destiny to have this actually become anything more than just kind of a hobby to take up time. And, you know, if I ever end up in a relationship of any kind, this would be probably the first thing to be put on the back burner, because, you know, relationships obviously take time and work, and unless I happen to find some gal who is an avid gamer and either wants to help with this or is doing her own thing and we can, you know, play side by side or whatever it is. But I just don't see that being my fate. I think it's going to be a little more complicated than that. Not necessarily with a relationship, but just, yeah, I don't know. I just have the sense. So I'm not doing this trying to grow any channels or try to become anything more than just a side hobby. But it is kind of rewarding. It is still getting something done when you put a video out there. It's something. You're creating something, even if it's not absolutely stellar. You know, a lot of YouTubers that I respect, you know, they put a lot of time into their stuff. They write these scripts, they do a lot of research, they bring up all these visuals. This is pretty darn easy, but there are people that do this too. There are just people who talk. And oh man, this conversation, or this diatribe, this monologue is definitely lacking. And I realize I'm kind of warring with myself too, because, you know, initially I thought, oh hey, I can just bring up conversation, cut topics, whatever, just talk about them. But it's like, you know, people want to be entertained, and that's the goal of this, not to... I mean, I wouldn't even call what I was doing before, what I did like in the last episode, I wouldn't call it preaching, but it's like, it's talking about serious things, real world issues, or ways of processing our reality. And that's just not fun. Fun is making jokes, fun is humor, fun is comedy, but... Ooh. Wow. I got lucky there that I only did 4 damage. Goodness gracious. Come on, Mallow. Turn this thing around. Okay, I hadn't figured out that you can do... Oh, and Mallow's down. And we're done. It wasn't effortless, people. It just wasn't all that hard. Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just trying to rethink that as well. Like I said, I think with something like Chrono Trigger, I'll be doing a live commentary on it just because. And who knows? Maybe I'll do that as a stream and just record it so I can make it a video on demand, a VOD, if you will. But I don't know. We'll see. I've said it many times before, I'm not a gamer, I just enjoy playing games. And there are definitely worse fates. There are worse fates out there, worse jobs out there than gaming. I mean, most of the people that do it, they do it 4 to 6 hours a day, if that. But even if you had to do it 8 hours, I mean, granted, when it becomes work, and you have to do it, it's a little different, but even the nature of it, you know, creating videos, you know, if you want to go on a trip or something, you can just spend a few hours extra, you know, a couple weeks beforehand, cranking out 5 or 6 more videos that you can time release, and there you go. You can go on vacation, and you haven't missed anything. But whereas some other jobs are much more complicated than that. But yeah, now I'm just totally musing out loud. Internal monologue, gone haywire. Okay, well clearly I haven't learned. I feel like we're in the exact same position we were in when we last checked. Okay, there we go. Pick me up. Alright, got the timing down. That's another great thing with Mario RPG that I don't know if it's in Chrono Trigger or not, but I hope it is, but I don't think it is, which is your ability to impact your defense and your offensive capabilities based on timing and button presses. So obviously you know when you heard those sounds, it means that you've maxed out your attack. That little... And then defense, when you have the little hexagon barrier come up, it means that you timed your defense appropriately and you don't take any damage. And if you get to know your enemy's attacks really well, then you can almost perpetually. Dance around, Mario. That's right. Little shuffle. Little shuffle there. How does he even get his hat on? I just realized that his arms aren't even... I guess that's something I could talk about too. Something I don't know about you all. I think you can get away with it in RPG games more than side scrollers. Certainly, I think 100%. But you know, there's that. For me personally, there's a disparity between wanting the gameplay of a side scroller, but wanting it to feel like it's organic. And by that I mean, if you're breaking into somebody's base, you're not just going to have. It's not going to be just a series of platforms with bad guys on it. Like you would have corridors, you would have a basement, you would have, you know, booby traps and what have you. But you know, when you watch a lot of these games, or you play a lot of these games, especially the platformers, it's like the bad guys are just pacing around on, you know, doing nothing. They have no purpose. They're just there to get in your way. Whereas in a real situation, there might be a group of them hanging out somewhere, and then when you come into the room, then they all attack you or come at you. And they do that in RPGs and what do you call those? The hack and slash, the point and clicks. There's another name for that. The Diablo series. You know, it's like the bad guys are around, and then when they see you, they come after you. But they were kind of just, well, even then they're just kind of hanging out. So you know, having it seem like you're actually invading, or if you're going through Bowser's castle, you want it to be that you want to know that there's a reason for those bad guys to be there. The castle was designed to keep you out. And in some ways it does succeed in that, but then there's sometimes you play these games and it's just like the level, it's functional, but it doesn't necessarily make sense as part of a narrative journey, if you will. Like I said, with RPG, you have that. Everywhere you go, I guess stuff is still just walking around pacing. I don't know, I guess the ideas of enemies just makes you think about, okay, in stories, what do enemies do? What do the minions do when the hero's not around? You know, we only know what they do in relationship to the hero, but what does a minion do? What is that mouse's story? He's got gloves on. He's naked aside from the gloves, from what we can tell. Is his life, is that all he wants to do, is just kind of walk around in this cave? And, like, is he doing that because he's bored? Did he have somewhere better to be? Does he attack every other things too? You know, it's those kind of questions that keep me up at night. So yeah, I guess my whole premise, I think the RPGs make it seem more organic, especially when it comes to like the villages. It seems like people are milling about, but that's another thing too. I like the RPGs where, and I'm not sure that this actually happens, but I feel like with Tears of the Kingdom, depending on what time of day you came around, yeah, and that's actually 100% true. There was, you know, if you go to a certain time, go visit like a school during a certain time of day, there may be kids in there if it's during the actual day. If it's when school is out, the teacher may just be there, and then maybe he won't be because then he goes home. Like the idea of a world where all the NPCs are actually going through a process. They go shopping on these certain days. Every 3 cycles of the sun, they're going to be down, you know, they're going to be in the town buying X, Y, and Z. Like, I like those kinds of things where it feels really fleshed out, that you're interacting with the real world and the gameplay is organic. The gameplay is happening. You're interacting with them like you would normally interact with real people, versus it being, okay, I need to buy this, you know, I need to get more potions, so I'm going to go to this person who does nothing but sit in front of their tent all day long, or sit in front of their shop and never moves, never does anything, always has the same inventory. Like Skyrim was cool in the way they did that, where sometimes, you know, the inventory would change depending on the vendor. Sometimes the amount of money they had would change. And sometimes, yeah, it was just frustrating, but sometimes you go to, you know, one of those little kiosks or side shops, and they wouldn't be there because they'd be shopping somewhere else, or they'd be at their house, or they'd be at the inn. And Skyrim is one of those ones where I just... Oh, no, they have shoes on, too. Okay, so shoes and gloves. Rat Funk. Well, I guess if your name's Rat Funk, you probably don't have a whole lot going on. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that should be the ideal for everything, and certainly not for platforms. Platformers, but in order to be... Like, you wouldn't... all the things that, I mean, you don't have bottomless pits in real life. Like, unless you're in the Mariana Trench. Is it Mariana Trench? Something trench. You know what I'm talking about. The big trench. The place that we even, I don't think, have seen the bottom, even with all of our probes and robots and whatever. I don't think we've gotten to the very bottom of that trench. And it's an incredibly deep part of the sea. But aside from that, there really are no bottomless pits. They all have a bottom, even if they're kind of far. Which I guess, in theory, if you said, okay, the pits in Mario are only 200 feet deep, so there is a bottom, but after he falls that far, of course, he's going to be a mangled mess at the bottom, so it might as well be a bottomless pit. And then you got to think about, okay, well, you have extra lives, you have extra Marios. But I thought of that too. I was like, you know, if you had a game where, I mean, it would be harder to have your main protagonist, but think about it, if Mario, Luigi, Toad, and I don't know, if they just had characters that were essentially palette swaps. Like, you had the Mario family, and so you start off with Mario dressed like that, and then you have your Luigi, and then you have, I don't know, wow, how am I blanking on, are those the only 2 Italian names I know? Oh gosh, wow, Louis, no, I don't know, but just you have different palette versions of Mario, you know, up to like 50 lives or something, and maybe that's the max you can have. You know, something like that where it's, okay, Mario failed. Mario's either incapacitated or he's gone. He's out of the game, but now you can take his brother and do it. And obviously, your resources at that point, you're just taxing your systems, especially the older games that were, you know, a matter of kilobytes. I'm sorry, bytes. 45 bytes or something. The original Mario Brothers game would fit on a floppy disk. But, you know, nowadays you could do it, but I mean, that would be unnecessary, but just trying to make it more realistic. And I'm not saying there's any virtue in that. As I'm expressing these ideas out loud, which I haven't really done before, I'm going, yeah, no, it's a video game. It needs to still be a video game. It needs to be first. The gameplay needs to be first. And whether you have multiple lives, however you want to call them, or you think of it as a different version of Mario, but I just think it's cool to have a narrative, and that's what, again, the RPGs do a good job, where if you die, it kind of resets you back to where you were, so it's almost like that was an alternate timeline. And so yes, in that original timeline, the heroes failed, and the bad guys, that's why I like sometimes certain games will have, like, when you have a game over, it'll show, like, the bad guy achieving his goal, or whatever, so you kind of get, okay, the consequence of me losing is, in this timeline, the bad guy gets exactly what he was going for, and, you know, the world falls into ruin. But then you get another chance. You know, then you get to go back and say, okay, we're trying again, and that we can rewrite history, we can change the future. And I think that's a cool way to look at the video games. But with side-scrolling in particular, you just have multiple lives, but functionally, I guess it is the same as a time machine, because it is the same character. I don't know. You see, this is, and my brain doesn't feel mushy. The problem is, you can oversleep. And as I said earlier, I've been getting my 7 hours, which is about right for me. Some people, they do well with 8 or 9. I don't do well with 6. I don't do well with 8. I can do well with 9 if I'm that tired that I need 9 hours. But if I'm waking up at about the 7-hour mark, that's all the sleep I need. And if I go back to sleep or I stay in bed, I'm actually doing myself a disservice. And I was kind of lethargic all day. I got some stuff done, but ultimately it was not as productive as I would want it to be. And I told myself tomorrow's going to be a day, meaning tomorrow I'm gonna work my butt off. I'm gonna do a lot of stuff. It's easy to say that the day before and push it off further. And that's what I was saying earlier. My concern is that I've fallen back into a lack of discipline, because I was never a procrastinator. I was never somebody who would just, and I'm cutting myself off. See, I'm cutting my sentences off. I'm a mess, folks. I'm telling you, I'm an absolute mess. Now I'm not cutting myself off, and I can't remember what I was talking about. But when I was growing up, I couldn't enjoy my weekend if I had a project or a paper or homework that I had to do. I always got everything done on Friday if I could, or I'd get most of it done Friday and then maybe wake up really quick on Saturday and get it done. Like, I just couldn't enjoy it because in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I've got to do this. I even had a hard time enjoying Christmas break if I was reminded that I had to go back to school. Like there was a line in Empire Strikes Back, and anybody who used to watch TV back at Christmas time in the 90s, they often played the Star Wars trilogy, which is really kind of cool. But so you'd be watching it anytime C-3PO in Empire Strikes Back, they're going through the asteroid field, and C-3PO says, "But sir, the odds of successfully navigating an asteroid field are approximately 3,720 to 1." And Han Solo says, "Never tell me the odds." For some reason, that always made me think of math, which always made me think of school, which always took out, like for a moment, it took me out of the bliss of Christmas break, reminding me that I only had 6 days left until I had to go back to school. And it's really weird. I've talked to my mom about this before. I feel like people in general have either a gold glow around their memories, like their default for their childhood is to overall think of it in a positive way, and then but if you stop and really think about it, then you could remember the negative stuff that happened or the negative aspects of it. But you really had to kind of think and dig down. And then some people have the opposite, unfortunately, where they remember their childhood with trepidation or with fear or with anger or grief, and they have to really kind of dig deep to remember the good times. And I'm fortunate that I just have overall, I feel really good about it, about my childhood. Now, coming to know some things about like what my mom was going through at the time that I didn't know about, it's kind of subdued that enjoyment, because I just, when you're young, you don't know, you're naive, you're blissfully unaware of a lot of things. And so I just thought everything was honky-dory and life was good, and I found out otherwise, and especially for my sister as well, some things she was going through. But like I said, for me, when I remember those times, they're good times. But then I remember, like, school was the biggest joy suck of my life. I hated school. I'm an introvert, so I wasn't, trying to mix it up with people. I wasn't interested in doing that. I mean, later on in high school, when I could do theater and some, extracurricular, I was about to say extraterrestrial, extracurricular things like that, I started enjoying it a little bit more. But I endured school to get to that part. But I was never popular. I had small pockets of friends. Each year I managed to find anywhere from 2 to 4 friends at any point in the day that, we'd hang out and I could eat lunch with, or, that I could enjoy 3 or 4 classes with, or something. Like, I always had that small group of friends, that small support structure. And when theater happened and I got involved in that, the overall structure got bigger. The overall group of friends got bigger just because we were all in theater together. But even then, I still only had a handful of friends that I interacted with regularly. And that increased depending on the roles. If I got a role and I was now working with these other guys. But I remember we did Midsummer Night's Dream, and I was Nick Bottom, so I was working with the other working class folks. You had, was it Nick Bottom the Weaver, Tom Snout the Tinker, Peter Quince, Bellows Mender. There was 5 of us, but I still really only hung out with Peter Quince, who's my best friend Eric, and I think it was Snout. I can't remember which one it was, but there was a guy named Daniel Cabrera we were better than acquaintances, but not quite friends, really. But we had a few classes together, and so that didn't bring us closer. But then the other few guys, one of them was a senior, so I didn't really hang out with him, and the other one I think was a junior. I was a sophomore at the time. So, and we just never really hung out and never really gelled particularly well. So even when I was part of the theater group, it was still a smaller group of people that I hung out with. And again, it would change from project to project. Some of them, if we hung out long enough on stage, we kind of forged a temporary friendship or the feeling of a friendship that would carry on beyond the scene, would carry on beyond the stage. So we'd go backstage when we're waiting to go back on and we'd talk or whatever. But most of the time it was just that small core group of friends. And so I was never really loved anything that school provided on the positive side. And yeah, the projects, all the papers, the homework, math in particular. Math was a nightmare for me. Science was okay until physics. Physics, I think, is actually officially the only class that I dropped. It was senior year in high school, and I was failing it after my first week. I was an almost a straight A student for a lot of my school. A lot of my school years. At the very least, it was maybe, out of 7 classes, 3 A's and 4 B's, or like 3 A's, a B plus, 2 B pluses, and a B, or something like that. But I'd always be right on that verge with math, C plus or a B. It was always very close. Never really got much higher than a B in math. But science I was okay with, yeah, and then just physics, it just did not click with me. And I can't remember why, but I do remember I was failing it with like 3 or 4 weeks in, and I was like, there's no way. I ended up getting rid of that and taking a creative writing class. 'Cause I didn't need physics. I just did it because, that was kind of the next progression after chemistry or whatever it was. But yeah, I was like, screw that. So I took a creative writing class, and that went really well, surprisingly enough. But growing up, school was just kind of a nightmare for me. And I started resenting it, especially when I got into high school. Like, one of the reasons I started wearing ties. Later that would become suits and ties. But initially just ties, dress shoes, dress slacks. And I'd carry a briefcase with manila folders in there for my different classes. And part of the reason I did that, there were a lot of reasons for doing that, but one of the main reasons for doing that was to kind of trick myself or pretend that I was at a job. And that was the only way I could really stomach the idea that I'm going to this place for 7 hours. I'm actually not getting paid. And I'm just so that people can grade me. And, we weren't... Aside from keyboarding class, I'd say there really wasn't much I learned in high school. Nothing that I've retained anyway. And I started to resent that because I started to recognize that fact. And so it was a way of at least allowing me to pretend that I was at a job that just didn't pay me very well. It was a voluntary job. But, trying to psych myself up for the workforce. And then I ended up going to college, so I carried that over. And I got through 2 years of college where it was still kind of fresh, still kind of fun, and then it just turned into, this is just high school. It's just an extension of high school, still the same crap. Now, the only difference is now I'm paying people, actively paying people to grade me and to grade my papers. And I'm not gleaning stuff. I'm not, they're not teaching me how to, do taxes or balance check. Well, I knew how to balance a checkbook. And actually by that point, it was starting to be online stuff anyway. But it just struck me as a huge time suck. And that's why anytime I talk to somebody, unless you're trying to do something where you have to go through the higher education, where you have to, like a doctor or a lawyer, something like that, where you're, in order to, well, I guess if a lawyer, technically, as long as you can pass the bar, I don't think it matters if you went to law school or not. I'm not 100% sure on that. And I think it would be very hard to pass the bar without having gone to law school. But I think in theory, if you can pass the bar, you can practice. Now, doctor, that's something a little different. I think it should still be more of a, like learning a trade. Now, I'm not speaking, have not thought that through all the way, but in theory, if you're not, learning the humanities, you're not learning social studies, you're just there to learn how to be a doctor, I would imagine it could be the same thing like a trade school where you're going to learn everything you need to know. It's very specialized, and you're going to learn everything you need to know about that job, that you can do that job and be awesome at it. And obviously, you want that with your doctors. I don't know why it has to be attached to school. It's okay, go to school, and then you need 4 years more. I mean, if the school itself needs to be 4 years, I got it. And if you're saying, look, unlike some of the trade schools, because of the materials you have to use, you need x-ray machines and all this and that, it's going to cost more than a normal trade school would. That's fine. I just don't know why it has to be linked to college, but maybe there's a good reason for it. I'm certainly not trying to shake the pillars of higher education, at least in that regard. But in general, I just don't think you glean enough from school. And I've got several friends who have been professors who have been in the school system, and they try to tell me well, it makes you well-rounded. Like, I can guarantee you, some of the most well-rounded people I know never went to college. And they're the most successful. They're the ones with some of the best jobs right now. And, they've got families and they're great members of society. It would be very hard to say, well, you're missing out on something. All well-rounded means, it's a big nothing burger, really. Well-rounded. It has no intrinsic value, and it's very hard to pinpoint. It's just the idea, well, you take these classes and you hear other people's opinions. Trust me, this day and age, other people's opinions, that is something very cheap and very easy to find, and you're going to be exposed to it whether you want to or not, for the most part. You don't need to go into a class to find that out. A class is just going to try to make it seem more impactful. They're going to try to make it seem like you need to have, your mind should be a sieve, according to a lot of higher education. You should always have an open mind. Well, I can guarantee you, Mr. or Mrs. Teacher, that there are plenty of things that you do not have an open mind about, decidedly. And those are probably going to be things that are personal to you or whatever. And of course, anybody can say, well, no, I've got an open mind about everything. But I guarantee you there are plenty of things where people have made a decision. And it's like, well, until new information comes along, this is what my mind is made up. Closed for business at the moment. Anyway, hopefully the next one will be a little less meandering. I'll see if I can think of something to talk about in particular. But thanks for hanging with me. I will talk to you next time.